an afternoon or a morning session or an evening session if you're still managing to catch us on the other part of the world. Between me, Richard, I'm the founder of Mews, and Adam, our group product manager for all things guest experience. And I think that we all really love the world of guest experience because it seems to be the most the kind of the area that most hoteliers are most interested in really kind of revamping. And I think the pandemic did a huge amount of that. But I think we see that kind of that trend of greater tools coming in, being very strong. The pipeline of products and innovations, especially aided by AI, I think it's very exciting to see what will happen there. So let's get into
Absolutely,
our
it's the best part of our product.
yeah. Of course you're going to say that. I can't. I agree, but I can't say that because I love all of my children equally. Um, so I thought just in terms of what we did last time as well, we wanted to kind of go through some of the predictions that we had and some of the things that we thought were going to kind of be in 23, and to kind of have more of an overview of what we thought would happen this year, and maybe some of the things basically that didn't completely pan out the way that they are. Um, so I'll,
Yeah,
I'll
let's
I'll
get
start
into
with
it.
you then. Yeah. Do you want to ask me first, or should I go first?
Yeah, how about you kick it off? So, 2023, what were you predicting and what didn't happen, Richard?
Um, so in terms of what did happen, I think that I really we touched upon it I think in the first previous part, but I think generally we were pretty bullish on what this year was going to actually kind of look like. We saw that there was a lot of pent up demand. I think that there was um, you know, it's interesting because when you speak to people outside of this industry, they tend to think that it's a lot more fragile than it is, and that essentially you also kind of have different types of demand. Um, and I think that we've always been of the view that the travel is a fundamental, perceived as a kind of fundamental right for most people, and they do kind of expect to be able to actually kind of travel. And I think in this world where more and more kind of virtual experiences are commoditized and they're being made available at a moment's notice, those kind of offline moments and those moments that almost kind of offer a higher friction than you encounter in your day-to-day life. I think that's where kind of memories are formed, and those are actually kind of prized higher. So that was one of the things that I think we as a company really predicted. And I remember, we have a fantastic team that tries to kind of look at the numbers, and I remember having a real fight with them basically about whether this year was going to be flat or whether it was actually still going to be a year of growth. And I was quite happy to see that I was in the end quite right, with the fact that for most of this year we did really see very strong performance in RevPAR, and especially Europe. I think most people were expecting Europe to kind of to fall behind. Everyone's kind of seeing, how strong the US economy is. But I think that, Europe kind of despite itself basically still managed to post some incredible numbers all through the pack. And I thought that, that from a kind of countercurrent to the story and to the kind of the doom and gloom that most people were predicting basically at the start of the year, it was interesting to kind of be able to speak to some of those people from outside of the industry, and be able to kind of show them that travel and hospitality are really here to stay. And I think that it really kind of will also be a different place once, for example, another pandemic ever rolls through.
Yeah,
What about you,
absolutely.
Adam?
The
How did you think about it?
look, absolutely. Like the revenge travel is certainly back. Like me, I think I've taken 3 vacations this year, and usually it's a once a year thing. Um, you know, myself and speaking to other people, with with the work from home is you tend to work a lot more, and really spend a lot more of your energy on work, and more vacations and travel is that perfect opportunity to reset. So absolutely, of course that's back. Um, Unfortunately, what for me, one of my predictions was that staffing levels would be incredibly slow to return, and I still have lots of friends that still work in the industry, and a lot of them left during the pandemic because unfortunately, the industry really burned them. So they've found employment elsewhere, and they have no intention, here to return. So that's why it's really important that me and my colleagues in product that we really focus on user disengagement, so you can have fewer staff to perform their duties at work without sacrificing on service. To your point about travel is, I've traveled a lot more, but I've found that the service quality has really dipped, and
Mm.
you don't really experience hospitality like how you remember.
Yeah, I think that's a bit of a shame. I think that the industry has struggled with, presenting a future for itself for quite a long time, and the pandemic did basically seem to kind of be that. It's interesting to see that, especially in the US, I think that, in the past 2 months, you have seen basically the amount of employment in hospitality kind of return to those pre-pandemic levels. But I agree that it does seem that it's basically a kind of complete shift of the kind of the professionals that had worked in hospitality for a long time, and they do seem to have kind of left. And I think that, without that idea of how we actually develop our talent, it's going to be harder and harder for us to actually kind of retain great people, as they mature and as they actually kind of want to move on to better and bigger things. So let me then kick you off by, what did you expect to happen that didn't happen though?
Yeah, look, during pandemic and for years, we've been really hearing around more hoteliers wanting to implement, self-service technologies. We've talked about things like mobile key for such a long time, years ago, it felt like every 6 months there would be a press release coming out saying this chain plans to have 100% mobile key adoption before this date, and it never really happened. I was reading an article that 80% of hoteliers wanted to implement technology to lead to a contactless experience. I travel a lot, for work, but also for vacations and things like that, and I rarely interact with self-service technology. Um, I do stay, in a lot of non-Mews hotels because I'm in Australia, but that really surprised me. Um, that there still hasn't been a big take up of self-service technology.
Yeah. Like I think for myself, I really expected, I think that before or kind of during the pandemic, I'd speak to friends of mine who work in real estate, and especially kind of commercial real estate, and and I think that it was a bit of a shock to the system basically for them to see how many people basically did not want to kind of come back to the office. I think the one thing that I didn't anticipate, that this year there would be such a snapback to the office. I think that, whilst people who I think are looking at the future of work and are kind of interested in that, they could see, the advances that we've actually made um, in kind of remote technologies, and the different kind of ways of working that people took on basically kind of post pandemic. But I think that I was personally surprised with, just how much of a snapback there actually kind of was, and how many different kind of cities. You don't see it in maybe some of the kind of the big metro areas, especially in New York or San Francisco. Although I think New York now, I think in terms of occupancies and in terms of offices is rising again, and I think you can see that, for example, on the corporate travel numbers as well. But for the rest of the world, it feels like 2019 never left. So I think that for me is a really big surprise. And while I'd still probably say that, as we get closer to 2030, remote will be a much bigger feature of our working life. And we might kind of have let's say basically kind of only 2 or 3 days in an office setting, I think it is
Mhm.
still basically an interesting one to kind of follow. But I personally was
Yeah, the
quite
Tuesday to
surprised.
Thursday crowd
Yeah,
will be there.
yeah,
And I see it. Catching the train into the CBD of Sydney.
yeah,
Mondays and Fridays you'll get a seat, but the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, everyone's going in there for to get their dose of human connection with their
yeah,
coworkers.
yeah. Yeah, try getting a meeting basically on a Friday afternoon with somebody in New York. It's pretty impossible. Like unless you basically drive out to the Hamptons to see them.
Yeah, people
But
have
yeah,
really started to use those 2 days to reclaim back some of
yeah,
their life and their personal time, which is great.
yeah, definitely. So yeah, so what was your big surprise? What did you not anticipate, or what did you kind of what were you surprised by?
Yeah, look, you know me quite well. I'm a massive nerd. I'm a massive geek who geeks out about tech and gizmos and things like that. My biggest surprise was at Apple's Worldwide Developer Conference, them talking about getting into the hotel TV space
Mm,
by introducing Apple AirPlay for hotels. Um, did not expect it. There were no rumors about it. But why I thought that was a big surprise was like we've talked about the frustration with entertainment in hotel rooms. There's a few great casting solutions out there, but they still make you jump through hoops. And this Apple solution that they're piloting, I believe it is with IHG, and they haven't yet moved it into general availability for everyone. Um, did not see that coming. Very very excited for it.
yeah, nice. Like I think that promise of basically being able to just arrive, go to your room, have it personalized, without the gizmos of basically like, here's a fancy light or something like that. But
Yeah,
here's my living room, even when I kind of like travel, and here's my setup. I think that it does feel like we should be in that kind of age, and it is nice basically to see, that Apple does seem to kind of care about it and does see travel as a big proportion of
extension of
how
home.
we actually
Yeah.
exactly and how we live life. So I think that that's interesting. I think my surprise is probably a little bit more kind of boring and corporate, and it's more about the fact that um, the big surprise is basically seeing the kind of the hostile takeover of Wyndham by choice, and I think that I think it's pretty much everyone in hospitality's favorite soap opera at this point, and it's just a really really interesting play, and it's also interesting from a strategic perspective as well. Basically, you wonder how much of that has to do with Wyndham's growth in being able to kind of facilitate to some of that kind of extended stay. I think there was a really good article in Skift about that just a couple of days, and I think that the land grab for extended stay seems to be basically kind of very much on for all the brands. But I think with that, it's almost surprising to me that we haven't seen more M&A in this environment. I think that whilst you can kind of understand it because basically like travel has been on a bit of a tear, and so I think that people have been kind of you know really focused on that. I did think that it was interesting that we haven't actually kind of seen more activity in the space, that people haven't been as bullish, and I think it's probably just because of the fact that for most of the kind of the big brands and most of I think even the kind of the prognosticators basically for this year, most people were not expecting that this year would actually be as significant as it was. So my big surprise on the one side is basically the Choice Wyndham saga, which I think was, it's interesting that it's kind of being fought so publicly, but I think on the other side, it is a bit of a surprise that we haven't seen more of that and more of those deals. So maybe they're all waiting
Why do you think there is
for
a
January.
big push for these companies wanting to get into the long stay market? What do you think the main driver for that is?
I think the main drive, like I think that it's two, and this will be something that I'm sure that Joanne will want to kind of chime in on when we have her on in a few minutes time. But I think that the one kind of big push is basically, where do you find growth? at the moment if you're a hotel company or if you're a brand. And I think that, if you look at the amount of new build hotels, especially kind of post pandemic, it's kind of drying up. I think that, supply is expanding at 1% basically a year in Europe. I think it's even kind of less than that in the US. Of course, in Europe, basically there isn't as much of a kind of penetration of the brand. So you think about, the strategies that they'll employ. But I think extended stay does seem to be kind of this one area, and it's also a kind of, it's a really nice technology story. You can basically kind of check into a to an extended stay property basically, with just your phone. You don't really have those kind of service requirements basically. But I think, and at the same time, for example, in America, there's a massive construction boom in to do with basically the IRA, or uh,
Infrastructure.
the Infrastructure Recovery Act, rather than the Irish Republican. But I think that that's the really really interesting one, where you've seen so much kind of top down investment, and that's spun a huge kind of construction boom that you see, and a lot of kind of workers actually being temporarily kind of housed in all of these different places. And I think that,
Yeah, and it will be
one
really
area.
important with that for these, these extended stays to actually cater to those guests.
Yeah,
Because, I feel like, when I speak to a lot of hoteliers, when you say extended stays, they think corporate guests, relocating, but, the needs of these guests will be completely different, being away from their families for such a long time,
yeah.
working on these big projects. So, really making sure that these properties, give them a home away from home will be extremely important.
Yeah, definitely. And I think it comes to that point about, for example, the guest experience tools and things like that, being able to kind of offer that seamlessly. I think that's a big part of it. I think the other part of it, about it as well, is that, if you have such a huge tension in the commercial real estate space, and you do think about, well, what else can these spaces be basically if they're not going to be kind of filled up with workers, and if the trend line basically isn't that they're going to kind of be massively filled up, then you do kind of look to extended stay rather than pure hotels basically as conversion opportunities. And that might be something basically that we think of for 2024. um so yeah, so I
Yeah,
think that
well,
probably covers 23.
yeah, that's a really, really good segue into this next slide and this next question. What are you looking forward to next year?
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to this. I'm really looking forward to see how the real estate space kind of plays itself out. I think that there's some really, really interesting categories, like, for example, student accommodation, like extended stay, residences basically are kind of coming into vogue. I think that, the way that I see it is that, on the one side, all of us are living in cities which are becoming more and more expensive to actually kind of live in, which I think that, that should be a boon for hotels, because it basically kind of means that, we should be able to kind of leverage short-term stays and kind of longer term stays, as we do. I think that I'm really, really excited to see where the market actually kind of goes to in 24, because much like 2023, was a year that nobody really knew exactly what's going to kind of happen. I think 24 is basically kind of even more so. I think on the one side, you basically see, a lot of geopolitical kind of tension. Ukraine and Russia hasn't basically kind of, slowed down. In the Middle East, basically, there's the kind of the simmering tension, and the war basically between Israel and Hamas, and that's kind of spilling over. And I think that all of those things are very, very difficult, basically, from a prognosis perspective, to see actually kind of where that will lead to, with other geopolitical tensions kind of flaring up. And I think that will take us through to the US presidential election as well, basically. So it's on the one side, it's kind of it's very kind of touch and go about exactly how this year will go. But then again, you see the kind of the main indicators and the fact that most people are actually kind of happy about, again, especially in the US, a kind of soft landing that you begin to see. And I think with that, we will, I think, probably see a recovery again in some other forms of travel. And again, basically because I don't think that employment has kind of is going down, and I think that wages are basically kind of staying high. I personally still believe basically that we're going to see growth in 24 in hospitality. I think that whereas most people are expecting things to be a little bit flat, and I think we as a company are basically kind of expecting that. I'm secretly actually kind of very optimistic about the way that 24 from a hospitality sense will actually kind of pan out. So yeah, I'm more the kind of the optimist basically with that. And I think,
Mm.
yeah, how do you feel about that?
So does that make me the fun one? Um, me, look, 2024 for me, me as a product manager for guest experience, um, you know, seeing the adoption of guest-facing technology in hotels, that's really what excites me. And I come from a background of working in hotels, and seeing the hotels that I've worked at start to shift and implement these technologies that years ago I was thinking this would make my life easier. That really excites me. Um, so the technologies we're working on, which we can't really talk about yet, really excited to bring those to market next year. Also, really excited to see the adoption of AI in hospitality, but not in a gimmicky sense, and the sort of quick demos that you see on LinkedIn, which people love, but in a way that actually improves your experience at a hotel and makes it personal because we've heard about personalized hospitality for such a long time, yet people really struggle with scaling it and rolling it out across their larger properties. Um, yeah, so for me, really, it's that adoption of self-service technology. I think interesting news that just came out a few days ago was the merger between Mr. Yum and Me and You for digital ordering in
Hmm.
restaurants. Um, so having one team and one company that really can accelerate that growth, because I think we all agree that digital ordering in restaurants is much better than the experience that you've gone through before. Yeah,
Yeah.
so to wrap it up, new technology in hotels is really what I'm
Nice.
looking forward to.
So maybe just to actually kind of press you on that, like, where do you see, and I know, it's a little bit inside baseball, but like, I know the kind of things that you guys are working on in GX, but, where do you see the first applications of AI? Because I think that most people do kind of see it in, slightly better chatbots. Where do you think that the first, ways that we'll be actually kind of like utilizing
Yeah.
AI in hospitality will be?
Yeah, I can tell you where I would like to see it. And for me, it's during the booking experience. Being, I think, a lot of people listening to this have probably booked a team offsite at some point. You need accommodation, you need a meeting room, you need dinner, you need parking for your guests, for your colleagues that live locally. And that is a painful experience because everyone is different. And it's a very manual thing that you must go through with a staff member at a hotel. And that I see is a perfect application for AI. That
Mm,
back and forward process of no, these people are arriving at this time. There's one vegetarian. Please edit that on my banquet event order sheet. Um, if there's an AI platform which can book this multi-service experience for me and the people I'm traveling with, that is what I want.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I think so. I think it like those are some of the hard tasks to actually trying to automate, and I think that that's what's I think super interesting about LLMs is that they actually kind of render some of these hard tasks of kind of context gathering
Yep.
like relatively easy. And I think that will be interesting is to actually see, well, how can we actually kind of make that better? If that part becomes easy, where are we going to actually find the hard things, and what are we going to kind of move on to next as an
Yeah.
industry? Yeah,
Because you mentioned chatbots, and you see these AI powered chatbots on hotel booking websites, and that's usually where the journey finishes. So
yeah,
it's very important that that journey continues the whole stay until the guest has left, and then they're
yeah.
thinking about rebooking somewhere else again. That context should never drop.
Yeah, I think that the context is the right word, because you know I think right now, if anyone's basically kind of spoken to OpenAI or ChatGPT or something like that, and asked it for recommendations, it's very kind of vanilla. It's very kind of TripAdvisor in some ways. You can
Yep.
do a few good prompts basically in one way or another, but you don't really kind of get it to be able to actually kind of give that context of who you are, and of the things that you like as well. And I think that once we're able to kind of do it per brand or per customer segment, and actually utilizing LLMs especially to kind of do segmentation in a much much better way,
Yeah,
I think
feeding
that
your complete
and
history.
to the ethos of the hotel, or of the hotel brand, I think that's super exciting for me, basically, that you actually start speaking to somebody who actually represents the brand almost better than an untrained employee. So I think
Yeah, and they know
that's
you really well, and
yeah,
and think about that small hotel with that one staff member. They'll know who you are. They know what you like, but AI will make that scalable.